Mister, I don't have a dad. Can I pretend you're mine, just for today? Those 12 words from a 5-year-old orphan stopped a broken man dead in his tracks. Cole Harrison hadn't smiled in 3 years, not since he buried his pregnant wife and the daughter he never got to hold. He should have walked away. Every instinct told him to. But what happened next didn't just change one day. It changed everything. And by the end of this story, one of them will be fighting for their life in a blizzard, while the other races against time to save the only family they have left. Stay with me. The bell above the door chimed softly as Cole Harrison stepped into Harrison's Hardware and Lumber, his boots leaving wet prints on the worn wooden floor. December had come to Cedar Hollow, Colorado with a vengeance. Snow piling high against storefronts, frost painting every window, and a bitter wind that cut straight through to the bone. Cole moved through the aisles mechanically, his calloused hands selecting nails, wood screws, and sandpaper without thought. 3 years of grief had turned him into a machine. Wake up, work, sleep, repeat. The laughter that once filled his chest had been buried alongside his wife Abby and the baby girl she'd been carrying when the pickup truck ran the red light. He hadn't celebrated Christmas since, hadn't smiled, really smiled, in longer than he could remember. "Mister?" The tiny voice came from somewhere near his knees. Cole froze, his hand still gripping a box of finishing nails. "Mister, excuse me?" He looked down. A little girl stood before him, no older than 5, with wild auburn curls escaping from beneath a knitted purple hat that was slightly too big for her head. Her coat was clean but faded, her shoes scuffed at the toes. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They were green as spring leaves and filled with a hope so raw it almost hurt to witness. "I don't have a dad," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can I pretend you're mine? Just for today?" Cole's throat tightened. The box of finishing nails nearly slipped from his fingers. What?" The girl clutched a small stuffed rabbit to her chest, its ears worn soft from years of love. "The other kids at the home, they talk about their daddies, about piggyback rides and bedtime stories. I just want to know what it feels like." She paused, her lower lip trembling slightly. "Just for one day, please?" "Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories reach." "Now, let's continue." Cole stood paralyzed. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, to protect the walls he'd built so carefully around his shattered heart. He wasn't equipped for this. He wasn't equipped for anything anymore. But then the girl looked up at him with those impossible eyes, and something deep within his chest cracked. A hairline fracture in the ice that had encased his soul for 3 long years. He opened his mouth to say no. What came out instead would change everything. "Okay, just for today." The smile that broke across her face was brighter than any Christmas light in Cedar Hollow. And somewhere in the back of the store, a woman with kind brown eyes watched the entire exchange, her hand pressed to her heart, already knowing that nothing would ever be the same.
Her name was Rosie. She told him this while skipping beside him down Main Street, her small hand wrapped around 2 of his fingers like they were the most precious things in the world. Cole walked stiffly at first, hyper-aware of every glance from passing townspeople. Cedar Hollow was small. Everyone knew Cole Harrison, knew his tragedy, knew his silence, knew to give him space. Now here he was, walking through town with an orphan girl who hadn't stopped chattering since they left the hardware store. "And my favorite color is purple, but also yellow, because yellow is like sunshine, and sunshine makes flowers grow. Do you like flowers, Mr. Dad?" Cole's step faltered. Mr. Dad. The words hit him somewhere soft and unprotected. "Just Cole is fine," he managed. "Cole," she repeated, testing the name. "That's a nice name, strong like a tree." Despite himself, the corner of his mouth twitched. Never been compared to a tree before.
"Trees are good," said Rosie, matter-of-factly. "They give you shade when it's hot and something to climb when you're bored. My friend at the home, Benny, he fell out of a tree once, got a cast and everything. Everyone signed it. I drew a butterfly." They passed the Cedar Hollow Diner, its windows fogged with warmth, the smell of coffee and pie drifting into the cold air. Rosie stopped suddenly, pressing her nose against the glass. "They have hot cocoa with the tiny marshmallows," she whispered reverently. Cole hesitated only a moment before pulling open the door. "Come on, then." Inside, they found a booth near the window. Rosie sat on her knees so she could see over the table, her eyes wide as saucers when the waitress brought 2 steaming mugs piled high with whipped cream and miniature marshmallows. "This is the best day ever," Rosie breathed. Cole wrapped his hands around his mug, watching her scoop marshmallows with her finger. Something loosened in his chest, a knot he hadn't even known was there. "Tell me about your home," he said quietly. "Shepherd's Heart?" She shrugged. "It's okay. Miss Meredith is nice. She reads us stories and makes sure we brush our teeth. But it's not—" She paused, stirring her cocoa. "It's not a real home. Real homes have families." Cole's jaw tightened. Outside the diner window, he noticed a woman standing across the street, watching. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and wore a practical navy coat. Her expression was cautious but not unkind. Rosie followed his gaze and waved enthusiastically. "That's Miss Meredith. She's my favorite grown-up at the home." She gasped suddenly. "Well, second favorite now." Cole felt the crack in his chest widen just a little more. After hot cocoa came the park. Cole couldn't remember the last time he'd set foot in Cedar Hollow Memorial Park. He'd avoided it deliberately. Too many memories of walking these same paths with Abby, her hand in his, her laughter warming the winter air. But Rosie had spotted the frozen pond from the diner window, and her excitement was impossible to refuse. "Can we skate? Please, please, please?" They rented skates from the small wooden booth near the pond's edge. Cole hadn't been on ice in years, but his body remembered, guiding him across the surface with rusty grace. Rosie, on the other hand, was a different story entirely. She wobbled, she flailed, she grabbed onto Cole's leg and nearly sent them both tumbling. And Cole laughed. The sound startled him, rusty and unfamiliar, rising from somewhere deep. Rosie looked up at him with wonder, her cheeks pink from cold. "You should laugh more," she said seriously. "It's a good sound." After skating came the snowman. Rosie insisted on 3 sections, because that's the proper way, and Cole found himself rolling snowballs while she directed operations like a tiny general. "Bigger on the bottom. No, bigger. He needs to be strong so he doesn't fall over." They gave him stick arms, pebble buttons, and a carrot nose borrowed from a kind vendor at the nearby Christmas market. Rosie wrapped her own scarf around his neck. "There," she announced proudly. "Now he won't be cold." "But you'll be cold," Cole pointed out. Rosie shrugged. "That's okay. He needs it more. He has to stay here all alone when we leave." Cole stared at her, this 5-year-old with more compassion than most adults he'd known. Without thinking, he unwound his own scarf and draped it around her small shoulders. "Now neither of you will be cold," he said gruffly. The afternoon light was fading, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. They sat on a bench together, watching families play around them, parents pushing children on sleds, couples walking hand in hand, the world carrying on in all its ordinary, beautiful chaos. "Cole?" Rosie's voice was small now, drowsy from the long day. "Yeah?" She leaned against his arm, her eyes fixed on the snowman. "I wish you were my real daddy." Cole's heart stopped. Before he could respond, before he could even breathe, Rosie's eyes drifted closed, her head heavy against his sleeve. He sat frozen in the gathering dusk, a sleeping orphan pressed against him, and tears he hadn't shed in 3 years burning behind his eyes. What was happening to him? Cole carried Rosie back to Shepherd's Heart as the streetlights flickered on across Cedar Hollow. The group home was a converted Victorian house at the edge of town, its wraparound porch strung with Christmas lights, and its windows glowing warm against the cold. A wooden sign near the mailbox read, "Shepherd's Heart Children's Home. Every child deserves love." The woman from earlier, Meredith, was waiting on the porch, a thick cardigan wrapped around her shoulders. Her expression shifted through several emotions as Cole approached: relief, curiosity, something softer he couldn't quite name. "She fell asleep," he said unnecessarily, adjusting Rosie's weight in his arms. "She does that." Meredith's voice was gentle, with a slight southern lilt. "Runs full speed until she crashes." She studied Cole's face. "You didn't have to do this. Spend the day with her." "I know. But you did anyway." Cole had no answer for that. He wasn't sure he understood it himself. Meredith led him inside, through a hallway decorated with children's artwork and paper snowflakes. The house smelled like cinnamon and laundry soap, warm, lived in, real. She guided him to a small bedroom upstairs where a twin bed waited with a purple quilt and a collection of stuffed animals. Cole laid Rosie down carefully, tucking the blanket around her chin. She stirred but didn't wake, her fingers finding the stuffed rabbit automatically. He stood there longer than he should have, watching her breathe. "You're good with her." Meredith leaned against the doorframe. "Natural." "I'm not." The words came out harsher than intended. "I'm not good with anyone. Not anymore." They moved to the hallway, then downstairs to a small kitchen where Meredith pressed a mug of coffee into his hands without asking. They sat at a worn farmhouse table, silence stretching between them. Finally, Meredith spoke. "I know who you are, Cole Harrison. Everyone in Cedar Hollow knows. Your wife—" "Don't." His hand tightened around the mug. "Was a beautiful person, and what happened to her, to both of them, was a tragedy that no one should have to endure." Cole stared at the table's scarred surface. 3 years. 3 years of avoiding this conversation, of deflecting sympathy, of burying himself in work so deep he couldn't feel anything. "She was 7 months pregnant, a little girl. We were going to name her Emma." His voice cracked. "She just texted me a picture of the nursery. I was supposed to pick up the crib that afternoon. And then I got the call instead." Meredith said nothing. She simply reached across the table and laid her hand over his. And for the first time in 3 years, Cole Harrison didn't pull away. Cole returned the next day, and the day after that. He told himself it was nothing, just checking in, making sure Rosie was okay. But every afternoon found him on that familiar porch, Rosie flying into his arms before the doorbell finished chiming. They fell into a rhythm, building blanket forts, reading picture books, walking to the park to visit Mr. Snowman, who now wore 3 different scarves donated by other children at the home. Meredith watched it all with quiet grace, sometimes joining them, sometimes giving them space. She never pushed, never pried, but Cole found himself seeking her out during Rosie's nap times, their conversations stretching longer each day. He learned that she'd come to Shepherd's Heart 5 years ago, fresh out of college with a social work degree and a heart full of stubborn hope. That she'd stayed when funding dried up and other staff left, working double shifts and fighting bureaucracy to keep the home open. That she loved these children like they were her own. "She asks about you constantly," Meredith told him one afternoon, standing at the kitchen window while snow fell softly outside. "If you're coming, what you'll do together, she's never attached to anyone like this." Cole's chest tightened. "Meredith, there's something you need to know." She turned to face him, her expression troubled. "I should have told you sooner, but I kept hoping it would fall through." Dread pooled in his stomach. "What is it?" Meredith pulled a folder from the counter, sliding it across the table. Cole opened it to find legal documents, official letterhead, photographs of a smiling couple standing in front of a large suburban home. "The Prescotts, Gerald and Diana." Meredith's voice was strained. "They've filed to adopt Rosie. The paperwork is almost finalized." Cole's blood ran cold. "What?" "They're from Connecticut. Good people, from what I can tell. Stable, wealthy, everything the state wants to see. She paused. They want to take her home by the new year. That's 3 weeks away. I know. Cole stared at the photographs, at this perfect couple's perfect smiles and perfect house and perfect life. 3,000 miles away. Rosie would be 3,000 miles away. Can't you stop it? His voice was rough. You work here. You must have some say. I've tried. Meredith's eyes glistened. But I'm not family. I'm not her legal guardian, and they've done everything right. The folder trembled in Cole's hands. Somewhere upstairs, Rosie was sleeping peacefully, dreaming of snowmen and pretend daddies, unaware that her world was about to be ripped away. There might be one way, Meredith said slowly, but it would require someone to step forward, to officially petition for adoption before their paperwork finalizes. Their eyes met across the kitchen. Someone like you, Cole. The words hung in the air like a challenge, or maybe a lifeline. And Cole Harrison, for the first time in 3 years, felt something that terrified him more than grief. Hope. 2 weeks had passed since Meredith showed Cole the adoption papers. 14 days of visits that grew longer, conversations that grew deeper, and a little girl who had somehow carved a permanent place in his heart. Cole told himself he was still deciding, still weighing his options, but the truth was simpler and far more terrifying. He was already in love with this child. It was a Sunday afternoon when everything shifted. Cole had arrived early, armed with supplies from his workshop, planks of smooth pine, child-safe wood glue, and a set of beginner carving tools. "We're building something today," he announced as Rosie bounced around him. "What? What are we building?" "A birdhouse." He knelt to her level. "Every bird needs a home, right?" They worked together on the porch, Cole guiding Rosie's small hands as she sanded edges and positioned pieces. Meredith brought them hot cider and stayed to watch, her presence warm and steady like sunlight through clouds. "You're a natural teacher," she observed quietly. Cole shrugged, uncomfortable with the compliment. "Just following the wood. It tells you what it wants to be." "That's beautiful." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a current of feeling neither was ready to name. "Look, look, I held up the finished birdhouse," triumphantly. It was lopsided, painted in chaotic stripes of purple and yellow, utterly imperfect. It was the most beautiful thing Cole had ever seen. "We should hang it by my window," said Rosie excitedly, "so the birds can wake me up singing." "That sounds perfect, sweetheart." The words slipped out before Cole could stop it. Rosie's eyes went wide. "You called me sweetheart," she whispered. Cole's throat tightened. Yeah, I guess I did." Rosie set down the birdhouse carefully. She walked to Cole with solemn purpose, her green eyes shimmering. Then she reached up and placed both small hands on his cheeks. "Daddy, can I call you Daddy now? Not pretend anymore, real Daddy." The world stopped spinning. Cole couldn't breathe, couldn't think. 3 years of grief and guilt crashed against the shores of this single perfect moment. He saw Abby's face. He saw the nursery that never got used. He saw everything he'd lost and everything he might still gain. "Josie," his voice broke. "Please?" Her lower lip trembled. "I promise I'll be good. I'll eat all my vegetables and clean my room and never ask for anything else ever. Just please be my daddy." Cole pulled her into his arms. He held her tight against his chest, feeling her small heart beating against his own. "Yeah, Rosie, I'll be your daddy." Behind them, Meredith wiped her eyes and smiled. Cole didn't come back the next day, or the day after. Rosie stood at the window for hours, pressing her nose against the cold glass, watching the road for his truck. It never appeared. "Maybe he's busy," Meredith offered gently. "Grown-ups have lots of things to do sometimes." But Rosie shook her head,
her eyes filling with tears. He promised he'd be my daddy. At night, she clutched the lopsided birdhouse to her chest and cried herself to sleep. Miles away, Cole sat in his darkened workshop, surrounded by half-finished projects and sawdust. The adoption paperwork Meredith had given him lay on the workbench, untouched. He'd driven to the courthouse 3 times. Each time he'd turned around before reaching the parking lot. You couldn't protect Abby, couldn't protect Emma. What makes you think you can protect her? The voice in his head was relentless, cruel, familiar. It was the same voice that had kept him frozen for 3 years. She deserves better. The Prescotts have money, stability, a real home. What do you have? A construction business and a broken heart. Cole buried his face in his hands. The knock on his workshop door made him jump. Meredith stood in the doorway, her coat dusted with snow, her expression somewhere between fury and heartbreak. "How dare you?" she said quietly. "Meredith, she cries every night, every single night." Her voice shook. "Do you know what she asked me this morning? She asked if she did something wrong, if that's why you left." Cole flinched like she'd struck him. "I'm not good enough for her," he managed. "She needs someone whole, someone who isn't broken." Meredith stepped closer. "Cole Harrison, every person in that home is broken. Every child who's ever been abandoned or lost or forgotten. That's exactly why they need someone who understands. I couldn't save my own family. How can I?" "Because love isn't about saving people," Meredith's eyes blazed. "It's about showing up again and again, even when you're scared. That's what Rosie needs. That's what she's been waiting her whole life for." Silence stretched between them, heavy and raw. "The Prescotts arrive in 4 days," Meredith said finally, her voice softer now. "After that, she's gone forever." She paused at the door. "The question isn't whether you're enough, Cole. It's whether you're brave enough to try." She left without looking back. And Cole sat alone in the darkness, the weight of his choice crushing him from all sides.
The blizzard came without warning. It swept down from the mountains on the 4th day, howling winds driving snow sideways through the streets of Cedar Hollow. Schools closed, businesses shuttered. The entire town hunkered down to wait it out. At Shepherd's Heart, Meredith was conducting evening head count when she felt the blood drain from her face. Rosie's bed was empty. "Has anyone seen Rosie?" Her voice rose above the wind, rattling the windows. "Anyone?" The other children shook their heads, eyes wide with fear. Meredith's heart seized. She tore through the house, checking every room, every closet, every hiding spot she knew. Nothing. Rosie's coat was gone. Her boots were gone. And the note on her pillow said only, "Going to find Daddy." Cole was boarding up his workshop windows when his phone rang. Meredith's voice was barely coherent through her sobs. "She's gone, out in the storm, looking for you. Cole, please." He didn't wait for her to finish. He was in his truck and driving before his brain caught up with his body. The roads were treacherous, visibility nearly zero. His headlights carved weak tunnels through the swirling white chaos. He drove the route between town and his property, scanning the roadside, praying with a desperation he hadn't felt since that hospital waiting room 3 years ago. "Please, please not again. I can't lose someone else. Please." He almost missed her. A flash of purple against the white. Rosie's hat, half buried in a snowdrift near the old covered bridge. Cole slammed the brakes, fishtailing on the ice before lurching to a stop. He ran through knee-deep snow, screaming her name. "Rosie! Rosie!" She was curled beneath the bridge, shivering violently, her lips blue, her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest. Her eyes fluttered open when he reached her. "Daddy?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You came." Cole scooped her up, wrapping her inside his coat, pressing her frozen body against his chest. Tears streamed down his face, freezing on his cheeks. I'm here, baby girl. I've got you. Daddy's got you. He carried her to the truck and blasted the heater, rubbing her hands and feet as color slowly returned to her skin. Then he drove faster than he'd ever driven before, straight to Cedar Hollow General Hospital. And he never let go of her hand. Not once. The hospital room was small and quiet, filled with the soft beeping of monitors and the hiss of heated oxygen. Rosie lay beneath warmed blankets, an IV in her tiny arm, sleeping peacefully for the first time in hours. Cole sat beside her bed, his hand wrapped around hers, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. Meredith appeared in the doorway, 2 cups of coffee in hand. She set one beside him and took the chair on the other side of the bed. They sat in silence for a long moment. The doctor said she'll be okay. Mild hypothermia, no frostbite. You found her just in time. Cole nodded, not trusting his voice. She walked 3 miles in that storm, 3 miles, looking for you, because she believed you would come. And I almost didn't. Cole's words were thick with self-loathing. I almost let her fear cost her everything. But you didn't. Meredith reached across the bed and touched his arm. You came. That's what matters. Rosie stirred, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw Cole, a weak smile spread across her face. You stayed, she murmured. Cole leaned forward, brushing hair from her forehead. I'm never leaving again. I promise. Real promise? Real promise. He kissed her forehead gently. First thing tomorrow, I'm going to the courthouse. I'm going to sign every paper they put in front of me, and I'm going to fight to make you my daughter, officially, forever. Rosie's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really. She squeezed her hand with all her remaining strength. Then her gaze shifted to Meredith. What about Miss Meredith? Can she be my mommy? The question hung in the air like starlight. Cole looked at Meredith, at this woman who had fought for these children when no one else would, who had seen his brokenness and stayed anyway, who had shown him that love wasn't about being whole, but about showing up. Meredith. His voice was rough, uncertain. I know this is fast. I know we barely know each other. But somewhere in the middle of all this, I started falling for you. Hard. Meredith's breath caught. I'm not promising perfection. I'm still broken. I'm still scared. But I want to try. With Rosie. With you. If you'll have me. A tear slipped down Meredith's cheek. She laughed softly, shaking her head. Cole Harrison, I've been waiting for you to say that for weeks. She leaned across the bed and kissed him, soft, brief, full of promise. And between them, Rosie smiled and closed her eyes. Best family ever, she mumbled before drifting back to sleep. The courthouse was packed on Christmas Eve. Not for a trial or a hearing, but for something far more extraordinary, an emergency adoption finalization that had drawn half of Cedar Hollow into the gallery. Pastor Donovan from the community church sat in the front row, staff from Shepherd's Heart filled an entire section. Even old Mrs. Patterson from the diner had come, dabbing her eyes with a holiday napkin. Cole stood before Judge Rebecca Morrison, his hand firmly clasping Rosie's. He wore his best flannel shirt, pressed for the first time in years. Rosie wore a new purple dress that Meredith had found at the Christmas market, the same shade as her favorite hat. Meredith stood beside them, her fingers intertwined with Cole's free hand. Mr. Harrison, the judge began, peering over her glasses, this court has reviewed your petition, your home study, and the testimonies of everyone in this community who apparently thinks you hang the moon. Soft laughter rippled through the gallery. More importantly, the judge continued, her voice warming, we've heard from this remarkable little girl about what you mean to her. She looked down at Rosie. Young lady, would you like to say anything before I make this official? Rosie stepped forward with serious solemnity. Yes, ma'am. She cleared her throat. I asked Cole to be my daddy for just one day, but he gave me forever instead. She looked up at him with shining eyes. That's the best Christmas present anyone ever got. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Morrison blinked rapidly, reaching for a tissue. Well then, she managed, by the power vested in me by the state of Colorado, I hereby declare that Rosalie Joy Harrison is now officially and irrevocably your daughter. The gavel fell. The courtroom erupted. Cole swept Rosie into his arms, spinning her around as she shrieked with joy. Meredith wrapped her arms around both of them, tears streaming down her face. Applause thundered. People cheered. Someone started singing Joy to the World, and soon the entire gallery joined in. Later that evening, as snow fell gently over Sear Hollow, the newly formed family walked hand in hand down Main Street. Christmas lights twinkled in every window. Carolers sang on corners. The world felt wrapped in magic. They stopped in front of Harrison's Hardware and Lumber. This is where it started, Cole said quietly, looking at the weathered sign. Right in that doorway. You asked a stranger to be your daddy for one day. And look what happened. Look what happened, grinned Rosie. Look what happened, echoed Cole, his voice thick. He reached into his coat pocket and turned to Meredith. She gasped as he dropped to one knee in the snow. I was going to wait, plan something proper, but standing here where everything began, with our daughter and the woman I love. He held up a simple ring, silver with a small diamond that caught the Christmas lights. Meredith Callahan, will you marry me? Meredith laughed through her tears. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and rose to kiss her as Rosie squealed and hugged both their legs. 1 year later. The hardware store had a new sign, Harrison's Family Hardware and Lumber, where every heart finds home. Inside, Cole was teaching Rosie to sand a rocking horse while Meredith arranged the new children's book section they'd added near the entrance. Wedding photos lined the register counter. A basket by the door collected donations for Shepherd's Heart. The bell chimed as a young woman entered, holding the hand of a small boy with uncertain eyes. Rosie looked up, saw them, and smiled. That same bright, world-changing smile she'd given Cole on this very spot 2 years ago. She walked to the little boy and knelt to his level. Hi, she said gently. What's your name? Tyler, he whispered. I'm Rosie. Do you want to help me build something? My daddy taught me how. She extended her hand. After a moment, Tyler took it. And behind the counter, Cole and Meredith watched as the legacy of love continued, one small act of kindness at a time. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, we invite you to keep the warmth alive. Every soul has a story, and every story has the power to heal, inspire, and bring light to someone's darkest hour. Subscribe to Soul Tales for more heartfelt stories that remind us of the strength in kindness, the magic in ordinary moments, and the love that finds us when we least expect it. Hit the like button if Rosie's journey made you tear up, and share this story with someone who still believes in second chances, found families, and Christmas miracles. Because sometimes one simple question can change a lifetime. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.